Go ahead, make my day.
Greetings. Welcome to This, That, and the Other, where I react to, respond to, comment on, question, or otherwise propound on whatever I find of interest on any given day. Now, today's topic Sauron is kaput. Mordor and Isengard infrastructures lie in ruins. The armies of the men of the West have returned to the Pelennor fields outside Minas Tirith, where they prepare for the upcoming ceremony. And when the sun rose in the clear morning above the mountains in the east, all the bells rang, and all the banners flowed in the wind. And upon the white tower of the citadel, the plain white standard of the stewards was raised over Gondor for the last time. The captains of the West led their host towards the city. The great gates had not yet been rebuilt, but a barrier was laid across the entrance to the city. And before the barrier stood Faramir the steward, Hurin, warden of the keys, and the Lady Eowyn of Rohan, with Elfhelm the marshal. A hush fell upon all, as out from the host stepped the Dunedain, in silver and gray, and before them came, walking slowly, Lord Aragorn. With him were Eomer of Rohan, Prince Imrahil, Gandalf robed all in white, and 4 small figures that many men marveled to see. A single trumpet rang. Forth from the gate went Faramir with Hurin of the keys, and 4 men in the high helms and armor of the citadel, bearing a great casket of black lebethron, bound with silver. Faramir met Aragorn in the midst of those there assembled, and attempted to surrender his office as steward, but was rebuffed. Aragorn said that's still his job, and it always will be, and to get on with it. But Faramir stood up, said, "Men of Gondor, hear now the steward of this realm. Behold, one has come to claim the kingship again at last." He introduces Aragorn with all his titles and attributes, then asks the crowd, "Shall he be king and enter into the city and dwell there?" And all the host and all the people cried, "Yea," with one voice. Faramir explained the ancient custom of passing the crown along, and that they can't do that anymore, so he just went to the last king's tomb and took it. The guards stepped forward. Faramir opened the casket and held up an ancient crown. Tolkien described it. Well, that's a massive thing, a far cry from that wimpy little tiara in the movie. Then Aragorn took the crown, held it up, and said something in Elvish. Tolkien helpfully translates. "Out of the great sea to Middle-earth I am come. In this place will I abide, and my heirs, until the ending of the world." The words Elendil spoke when he first landed. Aragorn did not put the crown upon his head, but gave it back to Faramir, and said, basically, that a lot of people did a lot of stuff to get to this day. So, Frodo carried the crown to Gandalf to place it on Aragorn's head. This was replaced in the movie by Gimli standing in the background holding a pillow. Way to go, Peter. Gandalf set the white crown on Aragorn's head, saying, "Now come the days of the king, and may they be blessed, while the thrones of the Valar endure."
Now come the days of the king. May they be blessed.
Jackson trimmed those last 7 words off. Why? Aragorn arose, and to all that beheld him, it seemed to them that he was revealed as one of the sea kings of old. Wisdom sat upon his brow, and strength and healing were in his hands, and a light shone about him. But he did not sing any ancient elder song, nor did he visit the crowd. Faramir cried, "Behold the king!" And in that moment, all the trumpets blew, and the King Elisar went forward, came to the barrier, and Hurin of the Keys thrust it back. The king passed through and came to the citadel and entered. The banner of the tree and the stars was unfurled upon the topmost tower. Well, goodbye for now, Peter. Just have to traverse the last 4 chapters of the book without you. King Elisar got right to work. Lots of peace treaties and pardons for those who saw the error of their ways. And lots of praise and glory for those who earned it. And last, the captain of the guard brought to him Baragon to be judged. The king said to Baragon that much of what he had done would have, in the past, resulted in his execution. Oh, that's right. Jackson didn't think Baragon was worth including. So if you want to know the backstory, you'll just have to break down and actually read the book. You'll also get about 80% of your questions about the movie answered. Because the other 20% is stuff Jackson made up and there really isn't any explanation for it. But he got let off the hook because he fought bravely, and above all, because he saved Faramir's life. The king said, "Nonetheless, you must leave the guard of the citadel, and you must go forth from the city of Minas Tirith." He continued, however, saying Aragorn would need to do so in order to be the captain of the guard of Faramir, now the Prince of Ithilien. The Fellowship, the Hobbits, Gandalf, Gimli, and Legolas, remained in Minas Tirith. Aragorn wanted them around to share in something special, but he gave no hints as to what that was. Frodo wished to see Bilbo again and return to the Shire. He asks Gandalf what this is all about, and Gandalf, as usual, doesn't admit much, other than that Bilbo is also looking forward to being there, and understands why Frodo is there. And one day, Gandalf and Aragorn left the city and took a path that led up into the mountain to a high hollow where only the kings had been wont to go. There, after discussion about the scenery and much ancient history and prognostication, Gandalf told Aragorn to turn around. And Aragorn turned and was amazed. There was a sapling, a scion of the eldest of trees. Gandalf spouts a lot of mumbo-jumbo about these things can happen. Aragorn laid his hand gently to the sapling, and it was removed without hurt. Aragorn bore it back to the citadel. Then the withered tree was uprooted and laid to rest in the silence of Rath-Din. Aragorn planted the new tree in the court by the fountain, and it swiftly began to grow. When the month of June entered in, it was laden with blossom. The sign has been given, said Aragorn, and the day is not far off. It was the day before midsummer, when messengers reported a riding of fair folk, that is, elves, out of the north, and they drew now near to the walls of the Pelennor. And the king said, "At last they have come. Let all the city be made ready." It was on the very eve of midsummer that the riders came down the north way to the gates of Minas. A veritable who's who of elvendom. First rode Elrohir and Eladan, with a banner of silver. And then came Glorfindel and Aristor, and all the household of Rivendell, and the Lady Galadriel, and Celeborn, Lord of Lothlorien, with many of their people. And last came Master Elrond, mighty among elves and men, bearing the scepter of Anuminas, and beside him, on a grey palfrey, rode Arwen, his daughter. Frodo was moved with great wonder, and he said to Gandalf, "At last, I understand why we have waited. This is the end. Now not only the day shall be beloved, but night too shall be beautiful and blessed, and all its fear pass away." Then the king welcomed his guests, and they alighted. Elrond surrendered the scepter, and laid the hand of his daughter in the hand of the king. And Aragorn, the King Elisar, wedded Arwen and Lumiel in the City of Kings upon the day of midsummer. And the tale of their long waiting and labors has come to fulfill. It's time to head for home. Frodo went to the king as he sat with Arwen by the fountain. Aragorn said he knew what was on Frodo's mind. He agreed Frodo could leave in 7 days. In 3, Éomer would arrive to bear Theoden's body back to Rohan, and they would all leave together. Now, here is where Arwen bestows her place on the ship to the west upon Frodo. The movie never made it quite clear when that happened. If Jackson had included her words here, quote, "If your hurts grieve you still, and the memory of your burden is heavy, then you may pass into the west until all your wounds and weariness are healed," unquote. A lot of the "why did Frodo have to leave Middle-earth" questions could have been avoided. It should be noted here that this is the only real appearance of Arwen in the entire 1,000+ pages of the novel. The rest is Peter Jackson's fevered imagination. He wasted like a good half hour of screen time in dreams and visions that didn't happen. But include something that really matters? No. Arwen gave Frodo a white gem on a silver chain to wear sort of for emotional support. Quote, "When the memory of the fear and the darkness troubles you, this will bring you aid." Unquote. Now, as planned, Éomer came riding to the city with an Ered of the fairest knights of the march. The day of departure came, and a great and fair company bore away King Theoden upon a golden bier, on a great wain with riders of Rohan all about it. Merry, being Theoden's esquire, rode upon the wain and kept the arms of the king. Frodo and Samwise rode at Aragorn's side, along with Gandalf on Shadowfax, and Pippin rode with the Knights of Gondor. Legolas and Gimli, as ever, rode together upon Arad. In that riding went also Queen Arwen, Celeborn and Galadriel with their folk, and Elrond and his sons and household. and the princes of Dol Amroth and Ithilien. Never had any king of the Mark such company upon the road. Without haste, they passed into Anorion, and came to the grey wood under Amandin. Aragorn announced that the forest of Druadan would belong to Ganbarigan's people forever, and everyone else should leave it alone. That's another scene that depends on an earlier deleted scene. At length, the procession passed through the green fields of Rohan and came to Edoras. The men of the Mark prepared the funeral of Theoden. He was laid in a house of stone, and over him was raised a great mound, covered with green turfs of grass and of white evermine. When the burial was over, and Theoden was left at last alone in his barrow, then folk gathered to the golden hall for the great feast and put away sorrow. For Theoden had lived to full years and ended in honor. And when the time came that, in the custom of the Mark, they should drink to the memory of the kings, Eowyn, Lady of Rohan, came forth, and she bore a filled cup to Eomer. At the last, when the feast drew to an end, Eomer arose and announced the engagement of Eowyn and Faramir. Faramir and Eowyn stood and sat hand in hand, and all there drank to them and were glad. If ever there were two people in this story who deserved happiness, it's these two. When the feast was over, Aragorn and his knights and the people of Lorien and of Rivendell made ready to ride. Faramir and Imrahil remained at Edoras. Arwen remained also, and she said farewell to her brethren. None saw her last meeting with her father. They spoke long together, and bitter was their parting that would endure beyond the ends of the world. The entourage came at length to Helm's Deep. Then Legolas repaid his promise to Gimli and went with him to the glittering caves. They rode to Isengard and saw how the Ents had busied themselves. They hardly recognized the place. Presently they heard a voice calling, "Hum, hum, hum, hum," and there came Treebeard striding down the path to greet them. Gandalf said they had come to see how the Ents' work was going, and to thank them for their aid in all that had been achieved. Treebeard dispenses a lot of Old Orcish on the orcs, but reported that many escaped. But most of the ones who did ended up in the river. Gandalf questions Treebeard about Saruman. Now remember, he only died in the movie, not the book. That's very important. Treebeard gives some circuitous answers. Gandalf observed that he used past tense verbs when referring to the former wizard. Treebeard admitted to letting Saruman go because, quote, there was little left of him when he crawled out, unquote. He didn't seem like he could cause any more trouble. Gandalf accepted that with some resignation, and saying the snake still had one tooth left, his voice. Aragorn gave the valley to the Ents, as long as they kept Orthanc secure. There is some sad discussion about the Ents fading, no Entings and such. Now, since Legolas visited the caves at Helm's Deep, he now takes Gimli on a visit to the forest of Fanghorn. And speaking of sad, Aragorn observed that this was the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. Gimli and Legolas were off to the forest and then back to their own countries. Aragorn will go back to Minas Tirith. Gandalf and the hobbits head north to Rivendell and eventually the Shire. Not officially part of the Fellowship, but Galadriel and Celeborn will be heading home to Lorien. Elrond and his sons will still be with him for a while. Merry and Pippin had a farewell drink with their old friend. Treebeard makes an observation, echoing the exact words that Galadriel used to begin the prologue. 11 or more hours ago. The world has changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. And I smell it in the air. Now here it gets interesting. 6 days after leaving the king, the northern-bound group overtook an old man leaning on a staff. He was clothed in rags of gray or dirty white, and at his heels went another beggar, slouching and whining. Saruman and Wormtongue, alive, though not very well, but otherwise not changed, still hating everybody. This is a long sequence, but only little pieces are actually relevant. Gandalf and Galadriel both offer Saruman help, which he of course scornfully refuses. Then Saruman spotted the hobbits. He started digging at them, especially about pipeweed, which we should all know by now is just tobacco. He made some sarcastic remark about sparing a pipeful for a beggar. Merry offered him some, mentioning that it came from Isengard. Saruman suggested that it originally came from the Shire, and that, quote, "You will find things less good in the South Varthing than you would like," unquote. He took Merry's tobacco and kept his pouch. "One thief deserves another," said Saruman, and turned his back on Merry and kicked Wormtongue and went away toward the wood. Sam picked up on Saruman's comments about the South Farthing and having bought the pipeweed. Now, remember back when Merry and Pippin found the storeroom at Isengard, and I mentioned that if Jackson hadn't cut the last 4 chapters, finding the barrels of Longbottom Leaf would be heavy foreshadowing. This is just the beginning. Next day they went on into northern Dunland, where no men now dwelt. It was a green and pleasant country. Then they passed into Eregion, and a fair morning. Looking from their camp on a low hill, the travelers saw, away in the east, the sun catching 3 peaks that thrust up into the clouds. Caradhras, Levdil, and Fenuldal. Fenuldal? Good. Your guess is as good as mine. They were near to the gates of Moria. The time was now at hand for another parting, which they were loath to make. Celeborn and Galadriel and their folk would turn eastward, and so pass by the Redhorn Gate, down the Dimril Stair to the Silver Lode, and to their own country. They parted again, quote, for a while, unquote, until it was time for the 3 rings to pass away. Fading into the stones and the shadows, the gray-cloaked people of Lorien rode towards the mountains. Those who were going to Rivendell sat on the hill and watched, until there came out of the gathering mist a flash, and then they saw no more. Frodo knew that Galadriel had held aloft her ring in token of farewell. At last, one evening, they came over the high moors, the brink of the deep valley of Rivendell, and saw far below the lamps shining in Elrond's house. They went down and came to the doors, and all the house was filled with light and song for joy at Elrond's homecoming. Before anything else, they went in search of Bilbo. They found him all alone in his little room, sitting in a chair before a small bright fire. He looked very old, but peaceful and sleepy. He awoke with a bright "Hello!" So you've come back. He stated that tomorrow was his 129th birthday, and in another year he would match the old Took. The hobbits stayed at Rivendell for about 2 weeks, mostly spent with Bilbo in his room, talking over their adventures. Bilbo dozed off often, but when he awoke, the others would just continue from where they left off. One night, Frodo looked out of his window and saw that there had been a frost in the night, and the cobwebs were like white nets. He knew that he must go and say goodbye to Bilbo. October had come, and soon the weather would turn. Yet, even beyond the weather, he had a feeling that it was time he went back to the Shire. Sam shared it. Only the night before he had said, "Well, Mr. Frodo, we've been far and seen a deal, and I don't think we found a better place than this. There's something of everything here. And yet, somehow, I feel we ought to be going soon. I'm worried about my gaffer, to tell you the truth." That day, Frodo spoke to Elrond, and it was agreed that they should leave the next day. To their delight, Gandalf said he'd be coming along. In the evening, they went to say goodbye to Bilbo, who had stayed awake long enough to give Frodo staying in the mithril shirt, forgetting that he had already done so. He gave Sam a little bag of gold, supposedly the last of the Smaug vintage, telling Sam it'd be useful if he got married. He gave Merry and Pippin some good advice. What that was is not recorded. And beautiful pipes, pearl mouthpieces and trimmed with silver. And he finally asks Frodo, "What's become of my ring?" Frodo admitted he lost it. Then Bilbo fell asleep again. They all looked down at him and saw his face was smiling. He opened an eye. He told Frodo he didn't do much writing anymore, so would he mind taking his papers and putting them in order, and then come back when all was done? Well, Frodo was delighted to do so. The next day, Gandalf and the hobbits took leave of Bilbo in his room, for it was cold outdoors. Then they said farewell to Elrond and all his household. Elrond wished Frodo a fair journey, but he said that Frodo wouldn't need to come back. Bilbo and Elrond would be in the woods of the Shire the following autumn. There's lots more to come. Not that you'd know it from the movie, but time is short. So, until we meet again, thanks for watching. Check some of the other episodes. I tend to take different approaches to the story from time to time. Do all the comment, like, subscribe stuff. And better yet, buy me a coffee.